Yakuza 0, the first game that isn't a direct sequel to the Yakuza series, and I decided to play it before 6, not so much because it's a prequel to the whole series, but more because it came out between 5 and 6, and I wanted to play through this series where I get the most out of it without having to play the remakes and spin-offs, at least until I'm over with the main series. And while I could have played 0 first, I just don't think that would have been a good idea and would probably taint my view of all those other Yakuza games up until now. And I'm glad I made this choice, because let me tell you that Yakuza 0 is one amazing game. Starting with the story, Yakuza 0 takes place over 15 years before the first Yakuza game, that being the late 80s. That also meaning Yakuza 0 has no Haruko to be kidnapped or certain skyscrapers to fight in. Meaning story-wise, Yakuza team had to get creative with their storytelling. No, but seriously, taking place before any of the big events of the Yakuza series, Yakuza 0 had a big opportunity to develop its main characters and build upon the characters they become in later entries. Even doing that with the villains, who I must say are very unlikable in this game, to the point I did not mind beating them up multiple times. And without spoiling, it does deliver on that with the main characters as well, especially on the Majima side. Yes, this game lets you play as Dojima, as one of its two main characters, the other one being obviously Kazuma. The thing is, Kazuma and Majima don't know each other in Yakuza 0, so while their plots intertwine, they never actually interact with each other throughout the story, which always feel like a bit of a tease, but also works in a comical sense. Especially given the structure of the story, as you switch between these two characters every chapter, unlike in previous games where you played through each character's story fully until moving on to another character. Here, I believe iterating on Haruka's and Akiyama's chapter that did something similar in Yakuza 5, the big difference here being, well, both Majima and Kazuma fight, which can be a bit jarring when you prefer one of their fighting styles over the other, which leads me to talk about the gameplay. Well, technically, saying you'll prefer one of their fighting styles over the other is a bit insidious, because each character has 3 fighting styles, making a full 6. Well, actually, there's more, but it's not unlocked through the story, and well, it takes a really long time to do so, so I'm not really counting them in this review, as I'm giving the more normal playthrough kind of review most people will be experiencing. Regardless, starting with Kazuma, his fighting style mostly varies in speed and strength. One of the styles being slow and powerful, kinda like Taiga, while another being fast and weaker, much like Akiyama, and the middle ground that plays like your classic Kazuma. Then we have Majima, who cannot be put into such an easy box like Kazuma, his moveset being a lot more wild and out there. The first one you get, it's kinda representing how different of a character Majima is from Kazuma in terms of discipline. Majima being a lot more laxed and comical, also being a lot more influenced by street fighting than actual martial arts training, with a lot of sneaky and you would call less honorable ways of fighting, with also a big focus on using enemies' attacks to your advantage, even if there isn't a parry system in the same way that there was in Yakuza 4, for example. Then the second fighting style of Majima being a bit more straightforward, having a focus on melee weapons, much like another character from the Yakuza series, which I feel like I've been saying a lot. Although here feeling a lot more wild and loose, again to emphasize Majima's personality. Then we have his third and my favorite fighting style in this game. It's called Breaker, and it's basically breakdancing, but kicking people's asses while doing it. It's so wild and out there as a fighting style, but it works. And it's also great for crowd control with its spinning leg moves, and as you level it up, it also makes it just great for overall combat. Which leads me to talk about the level up system, which has had a completely overhaul, looking more like something out of Final Fantasy X, now being that circular skill tree and now working in tandem with the economy of the game. And that's brilliant, because now you don't need to particularly fight or just do side missions to level up. By the way, I have to address here that side missions have been changed a little bit from the other Yakuza games, where now you find them randomly, where before you would just have them marked on your map. Now there's a more bigger sense of discovery, which is nice, even if it probably hurts completionists. Regardless, anything that makes you money works to make you level up, meaning you can sink into any minigame guilt-free, and some of these new minigames are quite crazy given they had to completely redesign the world to fit the 1980s setting. One of these being real estate, which could only happen in the 80s. Get it? There is still a Sega arcade though, now having the chance to be historically accurate with its games, which is honestly pretty cool with games like Outrun and Space Harrier. In Yakuza 5 I said there was a big overhaul in minigames due to the engine change, but maybe I wasn't giving the team enough credit because once again Yakuza 0 brings a big overhaul to them. For example, the hostess minigame now not made better, just made completely different for this game, having a bigger focus on running the business over the individual girls, which is also a big part of this game, having that bigger focus, like I said before, on real estate and buying and managing businesses. It's quite crazy that this is here, but there's definitely a big incentive for it, given you can use money to upgrade, and upgrades can get really expensive later on. Also, a couple of other new minigames here that I liked were slot car racing, which is mostly about making good builds to be able to win races, and I'm totally ashamed to say that I spent way too much time with, but not as ashamed as the time I spent with this other game for totally different reasons, that being the betting on women's fight minigame, which is a bit more racy than I would have liked, but I didn't particularly mind it. But it is a minigame that people might hate, and that's totally fair, honestly, as the girls are not wearing much, and what they are wearing, well, I would have said is not proper fighting gear. Also, not a minigame, but now there's some crazy random encounters with these giant guys that have a chance to give you really large sums of money, but also have a chance to take away money if you lose, which definitely made me avoid them a lot because they can be really hard, especially early on in the game. Speaking of random fights now, probably because of it not being stuck on the PS3, the process of getting in and out of fights is now almost seamless, which is a great thing that I've been waiting for a long time. Finally, it doesn't feel like the game is loading in battles as you sit there watching two guys staring each other down. But overall, gameplay wise, 0 is the best in the series in my opinion, and it's also the best paced Yakuza game since probably Yakuza 2. Now moving on to a more technical side, graphically the world design is great, and that's really cool because of the setting as well. Given that we're seeing two of the classic Yakuza maps not only in a more modern graphical fidelity, but also in that 80s time aesthetic with a very moody lighting, a lot more moody than any previous entry regardless of the timeline. The one problem I have with it is that it looks too good for its own good at points. By that I mean some of the animations just don't keep up with the graphics. People's faces are very detailed, but when they move, it's so robotic that it feels very uncanny. Thankfully, this doesn't extend to the actual gameplay, that part being actually very smooth, which also kinda adds to the facial expressions feeling very odd. Just kinda feels like the Yakuza series facial way of animating is just a bit outdated at this point. Also, soundtrack wise, this is by far the best Yakuza sounding game. The music is really, engaging and it pumps you up, and I had some of these themes playing in my head long after I finished the game. I really enjoyed it, honestly. And because of all this, Yakuza 0 is the Yakuza game to cross the line, and it's the 9 out of 10. It's really the best Yakuza game so far, in my opinion, to the point where my biggest problem with it are that I prefer playing with Majima than Kazuma, so switching around sometimes feels a bit jarring. But it's also a nice change of pace and it kinda evens out. And of course that face thing. But that has been it for another review, as the main series Yakuza games are nearing its end with only 6 on the horizon. And then we can get into the remakes and spin-offs maybe, which particularly the spin-offs might be a hassle to record, because I don't have any way of recording PS3 footage, and 3 of the games are on PS3 only, or PS3 exclusives. So we'll see how we'll work around that, but hopefully we'll find a way. Regardless, thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing and liking and commenting and having a good day. Bye.